Going to start with the Daily Mail, and Chelsea dominate this one. And, well, they certainly don't mince the words with the headline. What a mess. Underneath that, under fire, Chelsea boss Potter feels bloated squad is ruining training sessions after clubs splashed out £553 million on players. First signs as well that owners' faith is cracking. Miguel, start with you on this one. Initially, thoughts are that a lot of Premier League managers would love to have this problem of too many good players.
But I suppose, I mean, and you can get into the bigger debate that we will later, given Pep Guardiola's comments about how much expenditure and wage bills usually translates into the league table. There's a high correlation. But there is, of course, that opening where it goes too far to the other side. And this is a classic case of that, because this really, or at least if you're ideally building a squad, it's not through introducing so many players at once and ensuring the manager has, I mean, literally every game Chelsea play, there's going to be about 20 players, 20, that are going to be quite irritated at the situation. Now, I think we are getting to the point where this isn't a sufficient excuse for Potter's performances, but it is just one problem contributing to what has been, I must say, a surprisingly bad season from both Potter and Chelsea.
David, the issue here, apparently then, too many players, as Miguel was saying there, too many players that want first-team football as well. Do you think it was a mistake bringing so many in so early, or is it going to benefit them from next season onwards?
But probably a bit of both, because I think Chelsea knew they needed a heavy initial period of investment with the change of ownership, because there were departures for the likes of Antonio Rudiger, Andreas Christensen, Marcus Alonso. And so we saw players come in the summer at great expense. And also now I think it was 6 in January, total outlay of more than £500 million. And Graham Potter's also had injuries to contend with. A lot of them are young players. There are significant mitigating circumstances. And so this squad number, I mean, it makes for brutal reading in Matt Hughes's piece in the Mail. But Graham Potter's going to have to show signs of progress. Chelsea's ownership are clear in the fact that they're backing him, that they see him as the manager for the long term. They invested in a 5-year contract for him, but they do want to see progress. And at the moment, Chelsea are regressing. And definitely the squad size is something that is going to be a challenge for him. We're already seeing that. You know, there are players who were left out of the Champions League squad who have been playing in the Premier League and vice versa. And maybe Koulibaly, for example, played at Tottenham yesterday because he's going to be depended upon in the Champions League, because Badiashile is not available for the Champions League despite playing well in the Premier League because he's out of the Champions League squad. So it's a very complicated picture. I do think Chelsea have recruited extremely high quality players that on the long run are going to serve them really well. But right now it's tough, and they've got a couple of crucial games coming up against Leeds and Borussia Dortmund in the second leg of their Champions League first knockout stage game.
Let's remind ourselves of the back page for the Star tomorrow. Miguel, they've gone with their play on words, checks it, the cost of not being in Europe. And it seems like they're suggesting that the players that might suffer from this bloated squad are 3 of the homegrown players in Conor Gallagher, Mason Mount and Ruben Loftus-Cheek as well. What's your thoughts on that?
And not that surprising, I have to say. I suppose as the back page puts it on the Star, it maybe accelerates something that was going to be an issue anyway, because, again, as we can just see with the squad, Chelsea needs some turnover now. They've brought in so many players. And just by nature that, it is going to mean, if they're investing in the future in that way, it is going to mean that previous favourites, previous established players, well, there might not be a space. It is kind of, we are really on unprecedented times for the club, given that, I suppose it's really since Abramovich took over in the first place that we've seen this scale of a change. Man City in 2008, of course, comparable as well. But it does mean that, I suppose, all old guarantees are gone, and Chelsea supporters might have to get used to, you know, previous favourites, homegrown heroes, which is something the club has been so obsessed with over the past 2 decades, maybe moving on. And that probably isn't something that's going to improve the mood, given that you can already feel this, there's a growing backlash against Graham Potter now.
David, is it sometimes the case that it's not always best to bring in the talent, and it's sometimes you've already got it there, and it's best to nurture it? Looking at these players in the past, Chelsea may have regretted certain players that they've sold on occasions, and these three certainly come with a lot of pedigree.
Yeah, it's a complex situation because it comes down to contracts as well. Mason Mount and Ruben Loftus-Cheek are coming up to their final year. Conor Gallagher has an additional year. There was a lot of interest in Gallagher during the January transfer window, I think 6 or 7 clubs. If Chelsea sell any of those players, which is highly possible now, clearly, and John Cross mentions that in his piece, then they would bank complete profit in terms of their accounts. And that's very, very attractive as a prospect, given the turnover that Miguel mentions. It was only Jorginho who left during the January transfer window, and pretty much everybody else has stayed. Hakim Ziyech nearly left, and I think there's a very good chance he'll go in the summer, maybe Aubameyang as well. But yeah, there may not be a great deal of room for sentiment in these decisions now. I think Chelsea are going to operate on what they're seeing, the evidence, the numbers, the data. And if players aren't performing to the levels they want or aren't part of their vision and good offers come in for them, then I think they might be quite clinical about it. We know that the Mason Mount contract talks have essentially been parked until the summer, at which point Chelsea are going to sell him or renew his contract. He's turned down a couple of offers so far. That's a really interesting situation. Loftus-Cheek's situation hasn't been talked about so much, but he started at Tottenham. And then, of course, Gallagher's an interesting one too. On the whole, I think Chelsea will think that they've done well in the market. They've upgraded a lot of their positions. Maybe some haven't gone so well so far, the likes of Cucurella, maybe Koulibaly. But it is very, very early in this process. It could actually get worse before it gets better. But I think on the long run, they think it will improve.